if we acknowledge the reality of the phenomenon now, it validates all of the previous instances of encounters with these same craft and these same types of beings that have been happening for thousands, tens of thousands of years. And I think, I think that plays well with this extratempestrial model, because if we are seeing the same thing over tens of thousands of years, it would indicate that the same beings or similar beings from these different time periods in the human future visiting all of these different periods. And that's why we see the same types of things. The way we understand it, the way we describe it's going to be very different based on our own level of technology at any of these various epochs. But I think it does, it's something important to consider. And Jacques Vallée and a number of others have focused on that too, just the antiquity of this phenomenon and how we should recognize it.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I'm Faust Chicho, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Dr. Michael Masters. Let me tell you about this incredible mind and what he's been up to. Dr. Masters is a professor of biological anthropology at Montana Tech. He received a PhD in anthropology from Ohio State University back in 2009. His current research program centers on hominin evolutionary anatomy, human variation, archaeology, and biomedicine. In 2019, he published an incredible book called Identified Flying Objects, a multidisciplinary scientific approach to the UFO phenomenon. This book examines the premise that UFOs and aliens may be our human descendants returning from the future to visit and study their own hominin evolutionary past. His second book came out this year, and it's called The Extratempestrial Model. And this book analyzes the multitude of well-documented cases of abduction and other contact modalities in this context of time travel and other theories put forth, which elucidates this complex and mysterious phenomenon that is a global phenomenon. Dr. Masters, it is an honor. Thank you so much for beaming in. Excited to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here chatting with you this evening.
Very cool, man. So man, your book it is such a wealth of knowledge about physics, astronomy, astrobiology, anthropology, biological anthropology. You draw on everything. It's like a gold mine, man. It's such an inspiring book. And this hypothesis that you have it's so logical and scientifically sound. This book that Dr. Masters wrote, everybody, it's like, I think you really wrote it, so that, whether you're a scientist or just a layman like me who's fascinated and interested in the subject, I think that you have absolutely something for everybody. So let me just take my hat off and say that it's so good. It's great to have you on the show. It's an honor.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that too, because it's one of the challenges of writing a book like this is trying to find that middle ground where your academic colleagues can read it and speak to them and sort of share this idea and get them information about UFOs, which often they turn a blind eye to. And at the same time, bring hard science to the UFO community, which has seemingly been seeking that. Yes. There's a lot of people. It's the whole spectrum. I mean, as well as anybody else. But there has been a group that has really been looking for answers and wanted a different approach. And it's kind of fun too, because you can, like you said, introduce all of these core concepts from anthropology and astrobiology and these other fields and do so in a way that's in the context of something that is fascinating and interesting to so many people, whether they're aware of it or not. UFOs just kind of tug at your heartstrings a little bit and send you down these rabbit holes. Yep. So, being able to bring together information from these fields, and obviously my main field of anthropology, and interject knowledge about human evolutionary anatomy and archaeology and cultural changes, when we develop stone tools, fire, all these things that a lot of people may not be familiar with in the context of the long time frame involved in the descent with modification in our form and in our culture. So I can't take all the credit for that. My beta readers were huge as sort of the lay audience, but then I also had peer reviewers who had PhDs in quantum mechanics, biology, and anthropology, who helped kind of shape it and find that middle ground between the scholarly academic side and the more layperson side. So
Yeah, man. And you
definitely had a
walk
lot
the
of help.
line so well.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's a fine line to walk, that's for sure. It's
It
hard.
is.
But it's growing
I
together. I think it's innately coming together. So it's I believe it's sort of in process and has been in process for a while, where these two seemingly divergent groups are finding this common ground in the middle. It's really nice to see.
Absolutely, and I really think that it's like you said, that this time, the time is upon us, right? You even have the government pivoting, and as opposed to propagandizing and trying to discredit everyone who has anything intelligent to say about this subject. They've pivoted to allowing that information to come out, and now we have the societal kind of reconditioning or deconditioning to go through, so people can actually allow this subject to come into conversation without thinking, oh boy, so I'm gonna get the tinfoil hat. So what I mean? It's like,
it's a
which
big
takes
sea
time.
change. It does, but you can see it happening already. Just the way people approach this conversation and the way. Yeah, I mean, my academic colleagues, the media, especially, it's still in the local news. You get the little chuckles, the UFO story. I've watched that happen with a few of my own, where there's some cheeky joke and everybody has a little laugh before the piece comes on. But I got to give it to our local reporter here, John Amy, MTN News. He came up to my office and did an interview the night before my first book came out.
Oh, wow.
And he even said that he called out the media and came on camera in between us talking and said, this is the part of the story where the cameraman makes a flippant comment about little green men, like calling out the whole industry. And it was huge. And that piece went viral globally and really awesome. Did a lot to further the conversation just by acknowledging that. And it was funny too, because the two reporters that introduced his piece did that exact thing. They were chuckling and laughing about it as he came in, and they come out from it like, oh, that was a serious piece. And they kind of said things that made sense there.
Yeah,
it was really good. But I think we need more people doing what he did and really acknowledging that this is a real thing. It's been a real thing for a long time, but now we can actually talk about that in concrete terms, and then we move on from there. What are they? Where are they coming from? Or maybe when?
That's the biggest questions, and it's amazing, to have had a conversation literally only 3 years ago, and be in a debate with a friend about the validity of UFOs in any way, the fact that and him being like, they're Chinese, and I'm like, dude, China doesn't have that kind of technology, bro. You know what I mean? He was like, well, they're not real. I'm like, well, there's something happening. There's something been happening. You can't call, I don't know how many reports on an annual basis we have, but I know that there's a lot, and there's been a lot. And
what's great too is that if we acknowledge the reality of the phenomenon now, it validates all of the previous instances of encounters with these same craft and these same types of beings that have been happening for thousands, tens of thousands of years. And I think that plays well with this extratempestrial model, because if we are seeing the same thing over tens of thousands of years, it would indicate that the same beings or similar beings from these different time periods in the human future visiting all of these different periods. And that's why we see the same types of things. The way we understand it, the way we describe it's going to be very different based on our own level of technology at any of these various epochs. But I think it does, it's something important to consider. And Jacques Vallée and a number of others have focused on that too, just the antiquity of this phenomenon and how we should recognize that. And, I'm sure you mentioned that in your debate with your friend too, is that if it's the Chinese,
how do you
so the Chinese developed this technology 4,000 years ago,
right? I was I was flabbergasted that I was even having the conversation. And then ironically, I think of about 6 months later, the New York Times came out with that article that said Pentagon admits to finding off world, and not that you can trust the times one way or the other, but I'm like, clearly something is going on where they're allowing more information out. And he was like, yeah, man, I guess you were right. I was like, well, dude, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bigger question, but
Yeah, no,
you
it changed the whole conversation, just
totally.
allowing that reference point for all of us on a societal level. Like, well, look, AA-tip was real. These programs were real. They are taking us seriously, even though they've been lying to us about that for 30, 70 years.
That's right.
Whenever Blue Book ended, there's a whole new conversation unfolding. It's great. It's great to see. It sounds kind of cheesy, but it's a great time to be alive if you're interested in these mysterious questions like this.
No, it's very exciting. So I've had this experience when I'm, and obviously my experience is going to be a very small sliver, compared to your experience in putting this body of knowledge together and research for this book. But I found that when I dive, kind of headfirst into something, a rabbit hole to research, as I'm putting it all together, right, whether it be for a show or something I'm writing, I notice that then when I think I'm finished, and then all this information starts coming to me, it just starts showing up. Right. And I'm like, oh man,
synchronicities out the ass. It's crazy. That happened to me when I was writing this last book. I got everything down kind of the way I wanted it. And then there would be like an article that pops up randomly in Twitter or something. And I'm like, oh damn, like
things just start showing up
here. And then you put that here and then this goes there. And yeah, it's insane how that happens.
Yeah. So and I wanted to ask you, from someone who's, you've gone from literally working, in the dirt, in digs, like classic archaeology, and coming kind of full circle, writing this incredible book in 2019. Like, so I imagine that your body of knowledge has changed since you wrote your first book. And I'm wondering, like, what, if you could speak to, like, what do you understand now, or how is your opinion different than it was, if it's changed at all?
Yeah. I mean, by the way, I just remembered my colleague, Jeffrey Kripal. He's a religious studies professor at Rice University. I think he has a word for those. He calls them like literary fairies or library angels or something, where things just sort of pour out of the heavens and help you finish a work. But
I like that. Yeah.
No, it definitely evolved. I call this from the beginning an evolving process, and it definitely did and continues to. I mean, there's so many examples, but I think the main thing is that, like, I'm always looking for something that would really make me shift my focus. I do still think this extratempestrial model makes the most sense. I don't think it can explain everything about the phenomenon. I definitely leave the door open for other interpretations and other models that might help fill in some of those gaps. But I do think, as far as the most parsimonious explanation, this is it for the majority of the phenomenon. But there's been little things that, I've read or I've talked to other people that I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it sort of contributes to my scope of knowledge surrounding this and the way I think about it and articulate it. There's been some little Easter eggs planted by people that claim to be, ex-intelligence officers and things like that. And I have no way of validating those, but they do make some interesting points and force me to evolve the way I conceptualize this again. And even just random people you talk to, who have thought about this a lot and have something interesting to contribute. It's definitely evolved. I think also I've gotten away from the nuts and bolts. I refer to myself as a recovering materialist because I was very focused on that aspect of it, and I've shifted.
Wow.
Not away. I think it's all part of the same thing, but I've definitely opened my mind to some of the more mystical aspects of this, and
that's incredible.
Just things that can't be explained with modern science and a nuts and bolts approach.
Boy, I know what you're talking about. I mean, I tend to, obviously, the name of my podcast is Far Out with Faust, but I tend to talk about a lot of those things. They are certainly part of what fascinates me. But I got this impression when I was reading your book. I was like, this is a guy who is a true skeptic, but an open-minded, logical man of science who is really approaching this the right way, getting the nuts and bolts down the way you did. I mean, it was clear to me that at least when you wrote this, you were very materialist focused, but the way that you allowed for, the opposition of each point you made, I had a lot of very strong impressions about. And that's why the first question I wanted to ask you was, what's changed? Because I'm like, man, so much information must have come to Dr. Masters when he finished this book. There's just so much out there. And now, slowly but surely, there's more roads being inlaid for more people to come forward and say, oh, the truth is, I worked at this place, under this contract. I was afraid to say anything, but now I am. And, you have a lot of people and you start to see some consistencies about what they worked on, what they're saying. It's like, oh, so they were hiding that too, and I was just wondering, if I'm sure some of those things came to you as well. And you were like, oh, wow.
Yeah, definitely. And, I even mentioned in my last book, I think in the Pascagoula encounter, where I overlooked AI. I really didn't talk about it much. I touched on it briefly in the context of how we would probably need that to develop backward time travel technology because of the risks involved in disappearing something from your four-dimensional reference frame. But I didn't really talk about it much in the context of the important role it could play in so many other capacities, and especially with the actual physical abduction process, which seems to have been the case with Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson and the Pascagoula encounter. And I mentioned in there how it seems like every time you finish a big work, instantly all of those little literary fairies come to you like, hey, you forgot about me, and it happened with this last book too. I was at Rice University, the opening of the archives of the Impossible thing that the aforementioned Jeffrey Kripal put on, the first ever paranormal based database housed at an accredited university. It's really kind of a historical thing that happened there. But there was one of the lecturers was Ed May, who ran the Stargate program and a lot of remote viewing things for the CIA and others. And he mentioned Joe McMoneagle, who I'd never heard of until then, one of the top remote viewers of all time, along with Ingo Swann and others. But I read his book. I was reading it. I started, I think, the week after I published the Extratempestrial Model. And he talks about how he remote viewed the future and saw that in the mid-century of this century, the 21st, that it'll be common knowledge that UFOs are time machines.
Yeah.
And that they're us moving through time. And I'm like, man, where was that?
Yeah.
Where was that a month ago? Because I had a whole section in the first chapter about all the other people who have talked about this. And that would have been a nice addition.
Oh, yeah. That would have been
one
awesome.
of the best remote viewers of all time. But
he was powerful.
That angel was a little late to the party.
Sometimes early. Man, there was some incredible insights from remote viewers, and I do a series called Believers versus Skeptics. Cool. And of course, depending on what side you're on, you're like, no, I'm the believer. No, I'm the skeptic, depending on what we're talking about. And I was like, it's so funny. I always talk to my friend who's on the show and I'm like, dude, any episode we could switch roles and I could be considered the skeptic and you could be considered the believer, because what we're doing is debating beliefs. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're skeptical about my beliefs. I'm skeptical about your beliefs, but it's just
exactly. And it's good to have that in any conversation. We need more of that across the board, and people willing to challenge their own beliefs too.
Oh my
God.
And
recognize the difference between a belief and fact, something that they just want to be true. So they add validity to it, whether or not it is true. I think it's important that we all cross-check our own belief system
Yeah.
and biases that we have in forming those beliefs.
Absolutely. And, look, to be human, I think, is to be a conscious human being. It is literally almost impossible to separate yourself from some bias. I mean, if you are raised on Earth by human beings and you're not a machine, even if you are a machine right now, you probably have bias. Remember, they made the algorithms, and the algorithms are racist.
Right.
They acquired our bias. You know what I'm saying? Because they were designed by humans.
Right.
So it's like you can't. What I realize is, like, I tell people all the time, like, look, yeah, I have children, and if my son does something, I'm not going to be able to judge him in any other way but through this prism of love and unconditional love I have for him. So I know I can't separate myself from that. That is a bias, right? So we're living on this planet. People need to realize that it's, take into account that there's usually a bias. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or good, but I mean, if you have an opinion and you can say the words,
arguably some are bad and some are good. I mean, I think the world would be a better place if we all had the bias of unconditional love, to be honest. And that seemingly it may be an aspect of where we're going as a species based on certain characteristics that are commonly reported in these close encounters. But there are other biases that are definitely detrimental on both an individual and a societal level, I think.
Yeah, so absolutely. And we've seen a lot of those come out in the last couple of years too, since you wrote your first book. So it's not surprising that it's come up in this conversation. But yeah, it's great to hear you say it. But it's funny because my tattoo artist is the most hardcore materialist you will meet. He's like, he's just like, he was just drilling into me and he's just like, just beat me over the head with the speed of light and all. And I'm like, man, we have these epic conversations and,
nice.
But I love when I was reading your book and you're talking about 6 million years of this incredible hominin evolution on Earth. We have this amazing history, right? That we've evolved from. And then I look at like the past 150 years and I'm thinking, what happened? And I'm like, I would love to ask Dr. Masters what he thinks happened. How did we go from this very long road of slow but sure evolution, and then even in the last 150 years, but if you want to take it, there's kind of some big changes that went on starting about, I think, 250,000 approximately. And then, the technology and the consciousness evolution that took place in the last 150, I'm like, how do you think what happened? I'm wondering what you think happened.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, speaking of bias, I think there is a temporal bias involved to some extent because we have a clearer view of this time. If there were archaeologists from, say, 5,000 years in the future looking at this time, what we're doing might not be that interesting or unique. It's that we can only look back at the past. So we have this sort of rose-colored goggles and focusing on these things because we can hear stories that our grandparents told. We have pictures, we have documentation. And if we're only in the middle of what's an acceleration in this cultural and technological change, then there's nothing really special about right now when looking back from a future period. So I think to some extent that's part of it. But I also think that it has to do with this feedback loop between our brains and technology. And really, ever since the first stone tools 2.5 or 3.3 million years ago, depending on who you ask, we set in motion what we call biocultural evolution, where it's not just about our brains changing or our bodies changing in response to the environment, but it's about using that brain power to modify the environment to suit our needs, to make it better suited to us and our survival and what we're trying to do. And culture allows that. And so we get this feedback loop between our culture and biology. In fact, in anthropology, we focus on that relationship as a synergistic relationship because we can't separate them. in human biology, they'll talk more about the human form, but in an evolutionary context, we have to focus on that technological relationship that we had too. So it challenges us. It creates new environments that we can live in because when we can solve problems with our brains as opposed to just the slow process of biological evolution. So, you go into a cold environment, you have these tools that help you take the warm clothes from a fuzzy animal, put them on yourself. We got clothes, we've got hunting, we've got fire eventually. And I think what we're seeing is just that same accelerating process where this biocultural brain body technology feedback loop has been happening for 3 million years. And it's just happening faster. We get a new iPhone come out every couple of years now. And that iPhone is the direct descendant of those stone tools 3 million years ago. We just built on this technology. And so I don't know. I mean, it seems like something that what happened to 250,000 years ago is really kind of just a line we drew in the sand. It's somewhat arbitrary because time is a continuum, but we have to demarcate our species at some point. And so once we see the development of a chin, and a broad forehead, that's where we said, okay, those traits mean that we are now anatomically modern Homo sapiens sapiens. But really, there wasn't a big jump in our technology or anything. The Neolithic Revolution, about 12,000 years ago, was kind of the big change that forced us to reorganize ourselves politically, socially, economically. We started to have public works projects because we had large enough populations. And most importantly, a division of labor that could occur because not everybody has to hunt and farm anymore. We have people that can be artisans or rulers or military or politicians. And so that bifurcation or differentiation in our labor force, I think, was really a big change too. And I talk about a number of other things related to our morphology that grew out of that, like a shift toward craniofacial feminization, self-domestication, which had been happening prior, but it really amped up around the time of agriculture about 12,000 years ago. So, I mean, we can't just really separate and say one thing happened. I've heard a lot of people say, well, the aliens must have intervened 200,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago, but it's all a natural process. I mean, I don't buy into the ancient aliens thing,
the intervention theory.
There's really not anything to indicate that. Maybe we'll find something eventually, but as it stands right now, and we do have a really good understanding of both our archaeological cultural past and our morphological, physiological, evolutionary past. And I would be the first to tell you if there was something that jumped out, but there's just continuity. It's an acceleration, but there is continuity across all these different time periods.
Certainly. Have you ever, it just reminds me, like the most convincing study I saw and theory that I read about what was this chromosome. I think it's chromosome B. Is it B? Are they lettered? Am I crazy?
Numbers, no.
Numbers. 2, chromosome 2.
2 and 3, yeah. That was a big change, actually. That's definitely something that it's the reason we have one fewer chromosome than our chimpanzee relatives, our closest living relatives, because 2 and 3 fused.
And the fusion is what I think is, that's what I've heard scientists say is suspicious, that it's so clearly fused. And now that we've got into enough technology ourselves that we actually do a little bit of gene splicing, we know what that looks like. And so people, some scientists have been looking and saying, well, we can't really explain that, but they know it happened around 250,000 years ago. And they say
it was probably long before that. I mean,
really?
if we're talking about chromosomal changes, I mean, it happened at some point between when we split with what became Pan troglodyte and Pan paniscus, the common chimp and the bonobo, but it was most likely long before that. It's kind of hard to pin that down in a specific time range because it's something that, until we have ancient DNA, but that only takes us back, so far into the past, time of Neanderthals, Denisovans. But we're talking about something that we might need to have ancient DNA from like Australopithecines or some 3 million year old race to really be able to figure out when that happened. But, It's possible, but we also have to remember that there is a lot of variation in chromosome numbers among mammals, among all life forms. Like blue whales have like 180 chromosomes. So
Yeah.
at some point, things do merge or get deleted or added to. So I don't, yeah, you're right. That is something that differentiates us from chimps, and it may have been impactful in some context, but that's also sort of data mining in a way that if we say, hey, we're special, let's go find something that's different.
If you go, you find what you're looking for.
Say, well, that's different. So that must be what makes us special. And, that's kind of, it's important to focus on those. We can learn from those, but I don't know if we can really attribute all of our uniqueness to that. I think it's much more multifaceted.
The answer usually is.
It tends to be. The simplest answer tends to lead to widespread conspiracy theories and whatnot. But the complicated answer is harder to get, but worth the effort.
Yes. Yeah. And usually the right answer leads to more questions either way.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I also love, you're right about interplanetary evolutionary convergence. And, just about everybody, I think, who's contemplated life on this planet realizes that the odds of things coming together the way they have are literally astronomical. It's and so the way that life manifests itself, on in these templates that we see, when I say interplanetary evolutionary convergence, and Dr. Masters will explain this, I'm sure, much better than me, but the examples on Earth in which like unrelated animals evolve similar morphological forms, such as the way that we saw marine reptiles during the dinosaur age and we see marine mammals now would be an example, or like wings in both bats and birds. And I mean, when you talk about that, I'm wondering, I'm like, does Dr. Masters believe in panspermia? Like, how do you think life got here? And how do you think these templates arrived?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a complicated situation. I tend to disagree with Simon Conway Morris. He is a professor at a better university. I mean, much love to Montana Tech and all, but he's at Oxford. And so I think he's very a strong proponent of this evolutionary convergence model. And I just don't see it. There could definitely be, if you had similar gravity, similar atmospheres, right, and water, but even if you add a little more gravity, and one point I make, I don't think this made into the first book, maybe it did, but based on all of the research they've done on these exoplanets, they seem to be bigger than Earth. The majority are bigger, like 98% are larger than this planet. And even adding that extra bit of gravity really changes the way an organism can interact with the weight of water and the weight of the air above them. And I definitely don't disagree with him that there would be convergence in some capacity as far as like biomechanically, legs for walking or wings for flying. But to get humans again is the big stumbling block for me, because there's so much that went into our specific evolution. The dinosaurs had to die 65 million years ago from this asteroid for all of these homeothermic mammals to come out and start reproducing. We happen to go up into the trees, or our ancestors did about 60 million years ago. We came down from the trees about 7 or 8 million years ago and stood up on two legs. Like, there's all these things that are so specific to our evolution. I just don't see how it could happen again on one planet, let alone multiple planets. And this is something I pointed out in my last book, is that if you do take seriously these contactee experiences and abductee experiences where they're told we came from this star system or this planet, there's like 10 different planets that they're claiming to have come from, and maybe like in the future we go out and inhabit those. My editor of this book made a good point that maybe it's like his ancestors are from Ireland, mine are from Wales. Well, when people ask where you're from, I don't say Wales or Ireland, because my people moved here so long ago that I say I'm from the United States. And maybe it's the same thing. They say they're from these planets, but really their origin is on Earth. They can be future humans that have been on these other planets for so long that they just say that as their point of origin because, their ancestors moved there so many thousands of years in the past. And, speaking about things that, how this evolved, I never thought about that. I'm like, damn, that's a good point. Maybe. But if, as far as independent evolution goes, I just don't see how you're going to get a human or an upright walking hominin of any form just with a completely different evolutionary trajectory evolve on another planet even once, let alone twice or multiple times.
You make a great point, and I've thought about it a lot, and I've read and heard a lot of experiences that people have had, in the abductee phenomenon, and I have one of the reasons why I love your book so much is because I really think that, like you said, that it's probably part of what's true about a lot of what's happening, and I think that goes. Because time is such it's such a complex thing, and the way that it can, when you start to understand it in a nonlinear fashion, then you start to realize. It made me appreciate your book and your theories like even more, because I think that they hold weight. Whether it's true that we are the descendants, or that or not, or it's vice versa. It works both ways. Yes.
But if they are interjecting their genes into the past or using our genes in the future, if there's hybridization of any kind, it could be both. It could be some individuals could be their descendants and ancestors. It gets a little fuzzy with the.
It does.
It's almost like temporal incest. Some people. In a way.
You have some people coming back and saying, "Oh, well, they've come because they need some DNA," and you have other people coming and saying, "Well, actually, they're the ones that put us here." So you have people coming with both, and you probably have enough people saying, claiming both, where you should probably consider both things as at least possible in some way.
Yeah, and they might be one and the same too. Honestly, if I tend more toward the former. That's mostly what I write about in both books, actually, is that I think what they're doing with the ubiquitous gamete extraction and the hybridization, air quotes for those that aren't watching this on YouTube, and other things, and really, to backtrack ever so slightly, if they are hybridizing with us based on the biological classification of species concept, we are the same species. They are us.
That's exactly right. That's what I'm
even
thinking.
If we can just stick our bits together, like if we can take seriously the Antonio Villas-Boas case, where he had actual sex with this woman who was very human, slightly different, bigger eyes, higher cheekbones, but they were able to bump uglies. And I think that's important to recognize in the context of shared morphology. And if there's babies happening, we got the same number of chromosomes. We got the same DNA in order to hybridize.
It's the only way it can happen.
Yeah, as eukaryotes, as eutherian mammals, we're splicing half of our DNA, combining it with half of the DNA from some other entity, and you can't make a baby with a mole rat. You can't make a baby with an elephant. You'd probably die in the process. But
and I see this all the time, and I feel like it's a fun, like there's a disconnect that happens, and I don't know exactly what it's from, but you seem to understand it, in a very logical and scientific way. I've seen, I'm sure that you've read about what's it called, the Antecama. That there was that little skeleton that was found, and
with the three fingers and
and it had the weird chin, and but it was very specific, and it wasn't a child. They could see that, and they ran this battery of tests on it. It was Dr. Greer featured it in the movie Sirius, and they did this not autopsy, but something like that, because they had this intact form. And of course, meanwhile I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, and I'm just guessing, but I'm like, what's going to happen is they're not going to know what the fuck this thing is. You know what I mean? It's like then they don't know what it is looking at it, and they're going to send the test out. And the tests are going to say, guess what? We don't know what this thing is. And that's exactly what happened. The test came back, and it was, of course it had some DNA, which was very much like our own. And then it had other DNA, which wasn't like our own, but they don't know what it is. I'm like, yeah, because they don't have a data bank with other beings, with other things like this. So we're spinning our wheels here.
And it's only recently that we even have a past human database to compare it to.
Exactly.
It was right around the time I was in grad school that we even found out that we could reproduce with Neanderthals. They were considered a different species, and we had to make them a subspecies because it was clear that we reproduce with them. But it's also important to keep in mind, and you having worked in the TV and film industry know that a lot goes into the entertainment factor in these programs. And I can't comment on that one. I haven't seen it, but I've also been working with TV and film and documentary crews, and you see a twisting of things or a reframing of things to make it more interesting and to keep that mystery alive, when in fact you could probably just go ahead and decide that this is a pretty normal situation, but they need that. That's what makes for a successful popular show. So we always have to consider that. I felt very fortunate. My first book got optioned by a couple different production companies. One fell through because of COVID. Another just recently fell through because the CEO died unexpectedly. Really great guy. It's super sad. But both, I was fortunate to have found ones that really wanted to focus beyond the entertainment, like bring in those elements. And this innately is fascinating, this whole subject. So
that's amazing.
You can do that, but to bring in the science too, and to educate people, like we talked about the top of your show, where you can interject knowledge that is still interesting, but package it in a way that is understandable and readable without just sending somebody to a anthropology 101 class. So
that's the challenge you're going to have.
Skeptical. I think there's a market for it, but maybe we're not quite there yet. But I do think that people are moving in that direction, not just with UFOs, but other psi type things.
Certainly,
telekinesis, mediumship, all of these other paranormal phenomena.
Very, very hot topics now. Not that they were ever, but there's a lot of ways to focus on them these days. And but yeah, I mean, as someone who has been both an optioner of rights and also dealt with people who have optioned rights of things that IP that I have come into part ownership of. Yeah, it gets it's challenging.
It's an interesting business.
It's definitely unique. It is a hybrid of a business for sure.
Yeah. It kind of ruins TV for you too.
Oh my God.
It's hard to watch shows anymore. I'm like, I know that didn't happen.
Believe me. Same with me. I mean, then being an actor, I'm like, I can't watch this shit, man. I just can't. Everything about it is repelling my soul. Between the acting, but I feel you, man. So, one of the things that I find fascinating, and of course, I may say, of course, but maybe some listeners remember, but I'm an identical twin, and so they love to use the identical twin example in the time dilation. So,
and in research studies, you can make a lot of money having an identical twin.
Man, for so long, trying to get my twin brother, I'm like, dude, why don't you just cut your hair like me and just come in. We'll do this audition. And he was busy doing a lot of other things, but the only time he ever volunteered was when he thought I needed a sex double for a movie scene I had with Tara Reid. He was like, "You need a double, man? I got you." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Get the hell out of here!"
Oh, that's funny. I worked at a restaurant called Harry's Velvet Room in Aspen, Colorado during my ski bomb years, and she came in with Carson Daly when they were dating, and God, we had Michael Jordan was there the same night. It was a super weird night.
Wow.
And I'm back of the house. I was a sous chef, but I would always come out and see what's going on in the front from time to time. And back then I wouldn't blame him. It was a fun time.
She was definitely
the
having
90s.
a good time in the 90s for sure. Maybe too good of a time. I don't know.
You
But
know, they burn out fast, don't
yeah.
they? That's, I
Oh
mean,
man,
to
yeah.
bring
She
it
didn't have
back
it
to
easy,
the, no, no, never. And especially in that time period, I feel like a lot's changed in the movie
Oh
industry.
yeah.
It's been very positive for female actors, but um, yeah, I mean, even with this stuff, like you don't, it's hard because you want to push the boundaries. You want to challenge the
Mhm.
status quo, and especially in the scientific community, because there's so much dogma and so
Mhm.
much just knee-jerk reaction to anything involving UFOs or time travel, and lots of other things too, but that's my
Yeah.
personal experience. So, you want to push at those boundaries, but those boundaries are also there for a reason. You can't burn
Yeah.
too hot or you just burn right out.
Yeah,
It's
you gotta
another
build a
fine
bridge.
line to walk. Yeah.
It is, man. So you talk about and this is, when I study this and then I'm hearing all these different things, but the core science of it, tell me how gravity has to do with people kind of understand the general theory of relativity as far as if I blast off and I'm headed to the moon at light speed, then I'm not going to age the same as my brother who's on Earth.
Yeah.
That's the general thing that people understand about this. I guess it's phenomenon, whatever you would call it, but gravity has a lot to do with it too. And I'm wondering if you could help me understand how gravity comes into play with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to give it to Tara Reid too for derailing that twins paradox conversation we started. 'Cause
Yeah,
I just remembered that we were talking about that. That's the
she could do
reason you told me about your identical twin in the
that.
first place. But yeah, so the way we understand it now, I don't know if we really fully understand gravity. They just detected gravity waves recently.
Yes.
Kip Thorne was a big part of that. I grew up reading his books as a kid. uh Much respect for him and all of his colleagues, but I mean, what we know now, I can go all the way back to Einstein's first paper on special relativity in 1905, where he showed that space and time both are relative to the speed of light, which is
Mm.
roughly 300,000 kilometers per second, as you mentioned earlier. So what happens is that, so if you go out away from Earth at the speed of light, everything freezes basically because you're moving with the light that came from Earth. You reach the end of that journey, however far or however much time you go, come back. Now, all of those moments are blasting through at this tremendous speed because the light that was coming toward you is now still coming towards you, but you're moving back through it at tremendous speed. But what's interesting is that within the context of that capsule, that spaceship, time and space are both compressed. So, yeah, if you're moving at the speed of light, time essentially stops. If it's some fraction of the speed of light, it's still slowing down. And this was eventually proven with all kinds of different experiments. One of the most notable one was putting cesium atom clocks in airplanes and flying them around the
That's right.
Earth. They could see that the speed of motion and also the distance from the Earth, which comes back to your question about gravity,
Mm.
affects the rate at which time passes in these different reference frames. So that was the basic idea. It's sometimes called the twin paradox, even though there's absolutely no paradox. It's very easily explainable. But then Hermann Minkowski, one of Einstein's main mentor, eventually developed this idea of four-dimensional space-time, where he combined 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, which is still our common understanding. Mm-hmm. Einstein built on that. There was this kind of back and forth with him and others. And in 1915 published his general theory of relativity, which factored in this curvature of space-time. And that's really what gravity is and the way we understand it now. There's probably something more happening there. There's probably some relationship to the quantum world that we don't yet understand.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing we're missing, is what is the relationship between gravity and quantum mechanics? But after his 1915 paper, now there's all these solutions to his field equations, and they understand it's not just that directional speed, that high speed motion. We don't have to go faster than the speed of light. And that's a stumbling block for a lot of people. They're like, well, we can't go faster than the speed of light. How do we go back in time? Yeah, we don't need that. We don't need to travel faster than the speed of light to go back in time. And you're right. The inertial forces won't allow that to happen if there's any mass at all. The only reason photons can do it is because they're massless. So if you have curvature, and the kind of cliche example is the bowling ball on a sheet, you put other marbles around, they all come to that because it's the biggest thing, and it warps space time on this two-dimensional sheet. So we have to think of that in 3 dimensions, but also 4, because it's also doing that same thing that the time dilation does with high speed motion in the twins. But if you sit close to a black hole or something with a high energetic field, a high mass, it's slowing down time in that same way. It's gravitational time dilation. It's not this velocity time dilation, but it does the same thing. It changes the way you perceive time and space and the way it's perceived relative to other people outside of that reference frame. So instead of traveling at 99% of the speed of light, you just sit by that black hole, drinking pina coladas for a couple hours. Yeah. And then, a couple of days past your friends back home who are probably out drinking you by that point.
Yeah, that for sure. That's thank you for that. That helps me understand, the concept a little better, because, I'm always trying to grasp it a little more and grasp what I know about, the concept with some of the things that I read about and heard about from some of the whistleblowers who have come out of, Skunk Works and Lockheed Martin, and, you have Bob Lazar and his story. I don't know if you've ever seen that documentary. Bob Lazar is that cat who,
but I've followed it throughout the decades. I've been interested in this since I was a kid, and I used to watch shows that featured him. I remember even in, I was at least 12. So middle school, early high school years. So he's been on my radar. I haven't dug deep into it. I get asked about him a lot, but I don't have an opinion as far as like, is it real or not? I don't get involved in those debates because only one person knows, probably, or a select few.
Yeah, it's true. He's a pretty straightforward dude. He's kind of, I don't want to call him like, a geek, but he seems like he's very intellectual.
Why don't you want to call him a geek?
These days it's a compliment. That's what I was saying. I was telling my son this earlier.
Nerd, geek. Weird. The dude calling somebody weird used to be bad, but now I think it's great.
It's a high compliment, man.
Yeah, sure. But no, he does seem like a geeky nerd. Also maybe weird, but he, I'd say is believable.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to enter the debate, but like I said, I've followed things that end up on TV, which is that itself, as we talked about, is sometimes obscure.
Oh, yeah.
But there's got to be people, even if it's not him, there's got to be people who have been doing these things, because we seemingly have the technology now. There's a lot of videos that come out from around Area 51 and have for decades that seem to show these craft moving in similar ways, which are probably ours. I wouldn't be surprised if we have them. I don't know if we've necessarily cracked the time travel nut open yet, but at the same time, I don't know if these craft can operate the way they do without that, because I think the way that they they handle the G forces is by manipulating time and space around them. I don't think they're feeling those G forces. I don't think they're feeling the gravitational pull, their momentum, their velocity, any of it.
It can't be.
So I do think their propulsion system is intricately linked to their temporal manipulation system. But we might be there, which means we might actually be traveling back in time sooner than later. And that, speaking of things where this has evolved for me, that was one of the biggest things where I wrote my first book around the grays, and this one, I'm like, damn, it might be pretty soon that we start doing this.
Dude,
which
that's
is
so
mind
amazing to
blowing
hear.
if you think about it. We might be the future humans to some Neanderthal
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. That dude, and even if look, I guess the question is, whether or not we got the technology from, a future version of us, or if there is extraterrestrials, which I do believe that there are, that I believe that both phenomenon,
Absolutely,
are
yeah, I would
happening.
agree with that.
And whether we recovered these craft and figured out, which I do believe that we did actually, decades ago.
Same.
And so if they're operating in, and we know because some of the patents have, leaked, the anti-gravitics that these companies, quietly patented and then tried to pretend they didn't. We know
Yeah.
about the patents, and we know who owns them. So the question is, well, what have they been doing with them? But the way that you can see that some of them are stated, then you would have to. I mean, it's not even going out on a limb to say that in some way, shape, or form they do take into the temporal and gravity, and then you see the way that they're operating, and you hear about people who happen to be there, whether on purpose or not, and you're like, it's very possible that we have, we're much closer to it than anyone can imagine.
Yeah.
And that's not even to get into some of the bigger, I don't want to say conspiracy theories, but you have some people who have much more unbelievable claims than others. Some people who never, when you have like a person who's been in the armed services for their whole life, and they're coming out and they're saying they have no reason. I mean, I just, it boggles my mind that people can get so conditioned to think that this subject is got to be for the cuckoo, when this is the person who dedicated their life to the Air
Yeah.
Force. Why the fuck would they want to put themselves in a position to be ridiculed for trying to tell you what happened? You know what I mean? Like, who
Mhm.
wants that? I don't
No, they must be
understand.
driven by something beyond. They had a successful career. It's not about fame or
No,
glory or anything. They know something that nobody else does, and they want people to know
that's
it.
right.
And it's hard to carry that burden. I recently had a conversation with a medical doctor who had he was abducted basically
Wow.
throughout medical school, and it really changed his perception of reality, the way he
Mm,
interacted with people, the way he viewed his job and like his purpose on this planet. And
wow.
like he said that to me, I've met a lot of contactees and abductees, but this is one of the first people I talked to on like he just really needed somebody to talk to.
Yeah,
And based on my work, it seemed like, I can learn things too. I've never had an
absolutely.
experience, and I benefit from. I dedicated my last book to people exactly like this who were brave enough to have this conversation. He'd only talked to his sister about it and briefly,
Wow.
but it's something that really shakes you up. And what he said, it reminded me of what you just said, where he would go in to visit with these patients to do these
Hmm.
exams, and he's like, he's thinking in his mind, you have no idea what this reality is, what this world is.
Yeah.
You think you do, it's familiar to you, but there's something else that you don't understand and can't right now. And
Mm,
that must be how these people feel, where they want others to understand.
yeah,
There's solidarity in that, where you can have
absolutely.
someone to commiserate with about this obscure reality that, and whether people believe you or not, you're going to ridicule them in the media,
Yeah.
and some people do say things. Some people get dementia, amnesia, all kinds of Alzheimer's effects, and
What
some
was his
people do say
experience?
crazy
Was it
shit.
positive, or was it traumatic?
Both. It
Both.
started as traumatic. It started as very your normal ontological
Yeah.
shock, like this isn't reality. What do you mean this
Yeah.
isn't real? And then recently reached the point of acceptance that we need a phrase for this, not the stages of grief, but like the stages of alien or something. I don't know what we should call it. There's got to be a better phrase
there's
than
somebody
that.
probably came up with something.
Probably, yeah, because it does seem to be this natural progression. But now he's not only at acceptance, but like, he's speaking of that unconditional love aspect. Like
Mhm.
he's skeptical of the medical industry, which we should all be skeptical about
Yeah.
on so many levels. But he started like a recycling program that take care of the earth thing that's
Wow.
reiterated throughout all of these contactee and
Yeah.
abductee experiences. So he started this huge community grassroots recycling program that's really been taken off and fills him with, he still likes helping people and the way that we help
Yeah.
people in the medical community. But he feels like this is a path he wouldn't have been on if it wasn't for these interactions with this higher consciousness.
Amazing.
These beings, which, I obviously argue are future humans.
Right.
So yeah, no, now he sees it as very positive. It was life-changing, it was life-altering, but it put him on the path that he thinks he was supposed to be on the whole time.
Wow. That's amazing to hear. I've heard a lot of experiences like that. I mean, I've heard a few that obviously were more traumatic, but a lot of people, especially people who I've spoken to recently, to tell me about how, especially when it's a younger person who this happens to, it's very
or a family member or like your child.
Is very it can be very traumatic, but I do notice one of the more common through lines is that it leads to something very light comes from this what started out as this dark place, and how it's fascinating how it manifests itself, but it almost always ends up with this person who has become conscious in a way that they've made it their mission to help not only other people, but this planet. And I find that pretty remarkable, about what that says, whatever the phenomenon is.
Going back to what we talked about earlier, I don't think they're manipulating our genes in any way. I don't think they're really interjecting them. I've met people who claim to have mysterious pregnancies in like their grandma or something, and they do have arguably and testable psychic powers, and they can remote view, and they can do these things that seem to allow the consciousness to separate from this fleshy meat bag thing we carry around.
Right.
But there's also, and that this was the impetus for my last book, is to focus on these encounters and what can we learn from them. And I think there's so much we can learn. And these recurring themes was the main thing I wanted to focus on, these patterns that emerge. And I covered 90 years, 5 different continents, because it's not a US thing. It's not a recent thing. It's a very old thing. And I had to draw the line somewhere. So I started 90 years ago. And these patterns that emerge seem to indicate that there is a more evolved consciousness associated with this phenomenon, whether it's extraterrestrial, extratempestrial, some aspect of the simulation hypothesis, or ultra terrestrials, whatever. Consciousness is involved, and so I don't necessarily think they're manipulating our DNA, but I do have to wonder if they might be either inadvertently or overtly modifying our consciousness, or sort of creating or helping us move toward
trying to
or maybe not, maybe even just by their presence here in our interactions with them, that we get things just from looking them in this window to the soul, and these big massive eyes that some of the more distant future humans seem to have, if I can call them that. I wouldn't be surprised if that is some aspect of this phenomenon, an attempt to either fix something, not that you can change time, but or to help create something that already is an aspect of their existence, which I think is somehow rooted in unconditional love and empathy and just a higher level of cognition and consciousness.
I thought these were going to be the words coming out of my mouth, and now I'm hearing them come out of yours, and I'm like, wow, this is such a crazy synchronicity.
Well, hey, I told you I'm not a materialist anymore. So
yeah, you're truly you're not. It's incredible.
And writing this book was, do you see these patterns? I'm just trying to convey the patterns that I see. It's, it's obviously somewhat utopian. I probably sound like some raging hippie.
Not to me, man. Not to my listeners. Everyone, be honest with you. When I didn't know how this conversation was going to go, because Mike seemed to me like I could really get a good sense that at least when he wrote this book, that he was very much a materialist, and that, which is why I led with the question I led. I also had an intuitive sense that it's very likely that he is no longer, not that I knew, but I just felt this, knowing that he has come into such information and the world has changed so much in just 3-4 years, that he may not be where he was when he wrote this book, which is why I led the way I did. So it's just so it's amazing for me to hear you say that, and for you, first of all, you can show people something all day, and that's also become, I think, very clear if you've been paying attention, that you can show people evidence and you can show people all these things all day, and it doesn't mean that they're going to change their mind. I mean, people can stare right at it, and other people who are ready to see it, they're going to take it in. Some others have decided for whatever reason, on a conscious or subconscious level, that they're not going to allow that into their present programming. So the fact that you have, and that you've maintained your integrity in doing so, as you are making observations, in the work that you're doing, and simply allowing the new information in, it speaks to your integrity.
Well, I mean, technically, that's what we're all supposed to be doing in science.
Yeah, it's very true.
In fact, I've been calling out my scientific colleagues for a couple of years now, because that's our job. I mean, our job is literally to look at the edges of our understanding and see what else is out there, to push just slightly beyond there. And I'll admit, with the UFO phenomenon, our standards of evidence don't apply. We can't test things in the same way. This model that I'm proposing is testable. By time itself, it's falsifiable, because we will eventually know if it was always us or if it was something else or someone else. But even outside of that, like that, you'd think we would be running toward this, not running away from it, where, there's this mystery. There's this thing, especially recently, that now it's real. Now it's fucking real. Yeah. It has been since, arguably 2017 or 2019, when the Pentagon confirmed these videos, 2020. What are these things? But they did such a good job.
They did,
of making us doubt the reality of this and our own experiences, people's own experiences, where they're like, maybe it was swamp gas.
Maybe it was an air balloon.
It's gotta be a weather balloon. I mean, now that you mention it, weather balloon. My bad. Sorry about bringing you
honest to God. That's exactly what they do.
Fuck these guys. It's ridiculous. That's not real, but they did a good job. Project Grudge especially, they did such a good job just getting this out of the zeitgeist of our culture and all of these different periods, making it something we not only can laugh at, but should. If you're not laughing at it, there's something wrong with you. Go get
How
your
good at that are they? I mean, they learned a lot from MK Ultra. They learned a lot from, from a paperclip, and then when after Kennedy. I mean, I watched, I just recently did a special on Kennedy, but I watched these people who literally were, said that they were right there when they heard this other person shoot. And, this dude is like a hardcore Texan. He's like 6 years old. He goes through the whole thing. He's like, nah, I heard him. He was right there. And then at the end he goes, but I know now that I didn't hear him, because they told me that the only one who was shooting was up in the. I'm like, no, motherfucker. What? You just spent 20 minutes saying what you actually heard, and then you told us what they told you happened. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
what?
Perception is reality. And they were so good. And we should probably define who they is here, because
Yeah.
I actually don't know who they is.
I was going to say, good luck with that.
Yeah, if you're expecting any deep insight, don't, because I don't know who they
Whoever writes
is,
those documents.
Yeah, but clearly they're at a high level of our government. And it makes perfect sense. Yes. You were gifted this technology. There's so much you can gain from it. Hide it. That's yours. That's your little baby. It's your precious.
Right.
But at the same time, we're here.
Yeah.
We kind of want to know. Hello. What you get there? What's your precious? Can I wear that ring for a little bit?
Right.
And I feel like we're maybe at a point now where that's starting to happen. Does it make up for all the lies we were fed? Does it make up for the manipulation, the PSYOP campaign? That it's not even conspiracy theory to say that anymore. It's obvious. It's a real thing that they did. Yeah. Freedom of Information Act. We know now that they were PSYOPing us hardcore, and I'm still a little butthurt by it.
Yeah, me too, man. And I'm still upsets me that I have to argue with people about the fact that they were PSYOPing us when it's not. It shouldn't be up for debate, but that's how good they are at it.
Yeah. The problem, because there is a downside, is that when you realize you've been lied to for multiple decades, then the obvious question is, well, what else were they lying about? And you can definitely take that too far. You can get some conspiracy theories where people are like, well, obviously they lied about this and that and everything else. Can't trust our government. And I honestly don't even know if we can even call it government at that point. Were they the ones doing it? Was there someone else pulling it? And then that goes deep state, and that's conspiracy theory too. So I don't know. It's more asking questions than trying to state my own personal views on it.
And you're absolutely right. And and I've been making this mistake. So, and I'm probably not alone in this, but we love to refer to these parties that create these programs as the government. And the truth is, some of them are government programs, but most of them are, unacknowledged government programs. In other words, the government is using our money to fund them, unfortunately, but they're not under any. No one is keeping track of what they're doing, because if they were, they would tell them to stop. You can't continue to do that. Not all of them, unfortunately. I mean, even some of the ones we're talking about were really done. They weren't even a part of the Black Ops, like MK Ultra. These programs were well known.
What a dark time in human history.
I mean,
it's so fun. It's so fun listening to Jim Semivan talk about this too, because he was in the CIA when this stuff was happening, and it was a different human world. Rights violations, ethic violations, morality. Like, I get it. They want to understand this stuff and they have a mission, but honestly, maybe we can also extrapolate to what this abduction phenomenon is. Maybe they are kind of like, this doesn't feel right, and I'm violating people. I'm touching them in their no square, but we have to do it, Then maybe they felt like they had to do it. The Russians are remote viewing us and they're testing these truth serums. So we got to give acid to people and then see what happens. Like
babies. Yeah.
If they can try to justify that based on some agenda, then it's not an ethics violation anymore. It doesn't violate human rights, because the bigger cause is, and honestly, in a lot of these abduction cases, I talk about one of John Mack's patients named Jerry in my recent book, The Extratempestrial Model, because she felt violated. She felt raped and she argues upwards of 40 fetuses implanted, extracted. And she eventually was like, I feel like I'm part of something bigger, and I feel like I'm just a small sacrifice for something that needs to happen. And it sucks. I'll be the first to admit that it sucks what happens to me, but I feel like it's helping in some way. But that's different coming from the person who it's happening to.
Right.
It's not like that dude that was dosed on LSD and jumped out of a window in the
Right.
1970s got to say those things. It was forced upon them, which is
Right.
like lab rat mentality. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think I think maybe we need to draw some parallels there, at least reflect upon the ethical aspects of what's being done to us and what we did to other people and what we do to other animals in some respects.
That's
I'm not
right.
like not a PETA person by any means, but it's recent that we outlawed the use of chimpanzees for research
Yeah,
as an
just recently,
example, globally, not just us, but globally.
Yeah. I mean, we have a terrible history of dehumanizing, people and justifying terrible
Yeah,
things.
I know.
And then it's just it's this general, and then they find one person to blame, as if one person could be
Right.
responsible. It's like, I'm like, listen, I tell my son, he's 11, but he's very sensitive. So I'm like, listen, you're going to learn about World War II, and they're going to tell you that it was all the fault of this guy named Hitler. Okay. But Hitler could have stood in front of all those Germans and said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And they could have been like, this guy's fucking crazy. We're out of
maybe
here.
let's not. I was playing Call of Duty with my son the other day, which is a conflict for me because it's like obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But he called Hitler like Abraham Dingle douche or something like that. I'm like,
what'd you say?
Yeah, all right. I'm on board with that pet name, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It was something like that, but it was hilarious. But yeah, no, it's actually a good lesson. And honestly, what's really weird is Call of Duty. If you've played this,
I have. Yeah, it's like the only game I
in between all of, like, you just killed all of the people in Baghdad or saved the beach and D-Day or something. But then it's always like these anti-war messages that come up in between.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting because you're playing this game.
You're playing a war game. Yeah.
But they're like, actually, war is kind of really horrible. So it's this weird kind of disconnect that happens there. But you're right. You can't blame one person for that. And then you see this herd mentality that develops, especially when there's crowds. Like if you ever watch the documentary about Woodstock 99, you can see it very clearly. It's just this crowd mentality because people become absolved of their individual behaviors. Well, now I'm operating as a crowd. They're not going to catch me because it's all of these other people. And we're doing this thing. And then it ramps up and allows us a glimpse into human behavior and human insight and just how animalistic we really are.
And allows you to understand how something like the Holocaust could happen.
Yeah.
In Germany and, some of the
everybody else is doing it. It must be cool. Especially, I think that's one of the most important reasons we need education, to be honest. To acknowledge biases. I am in education, so I have biases that I should acknowledge. But with that, with learning about history and learning about the past and learning about the ways people were manipulated in these and many other situations, the next time they try to do that to you, you can call the ball there. You can call bullshit on that and say, that sounds familiar. Isn't this wasn't that Nazi thing that they did?
Exactly like the Holocaust,
and
right?
But without education, we don't have that ability. We just repeat history over and over. And the worst parts of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And you said, it's unfortunate that we're seeing a lot of things that are reminiscent, and I think it's like the same people who write these papers, the same people keeping secrets, keeping technology from the people that would, allow for free energy, because I'm of the opinion that it's the same technology, that they've used to develop these incredible craft and God knows what else. I've only heard, rumors from whistleblowers and insiders. But by all accounts, the technology that they're sitting on is at least 100 to 200 years ahead of what's in the public.
Right
so
now,
now,
or when it was discovered. And
I think it has been since at
Because
least
even like
74.
Skunkworks and like the SR-71 and all those were seemingly 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
think we're up to like in the hundreds now.
I mean, all I know is, you have people like, I remember the CEO of Skunkworks, Ben Rich, he was doing a talk at his alma mater. This was after he retired. He was the CEO of Lockheed Skunkworks, and he was talking to these engineering alumni at UCLA, and he finished with this quote. He said, he said, we now have the technology to take ET home, and everyone laughing, but
he was like, no, for real.
He finished his talk with that, and Jan Harzen, who is the executive director of MUFON, was in the audience. He's also an engineering alumni, and
at UCLA.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's
interesting. And he pursued Ben, and he was like, Ben, he was like, man, I was like, I'm fascinated by what you said. He was like, what could you tell me how that happens? Like how are we getting through the stars? And he said he could see that Ben was trying to walk away, but Ben turned and looked at him and was like, I could tell he was thinking. And then I'll never forget it, because he answered my question with a question. He said, how does ESP work? And he was like, I just said the first thing that came to my mind. I said, all points in space and time are connected. And Ben replied, that's how it works. And he turned around and walked away. And that's the story that Jan tells of this.
Wow.
which is crazy.
There's layers to that too.
Yeah,
there's multiple layers to that conversation.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Love to be there for that talk.
Yeah, the only reason I was asking about the time frame, I'm doing some quick math here. Actually, I'm just writing down numbers. But if it's like 100 or 150 years in the future, but they started allegedly backward engineering, reverse engineering this stuff in the 70s, 70 years ago, 1940s, if we did get a Roswell crash that happened, if we can subtract 150 from 70, I guess I'm just trying to figure out at what point do we learn? Do we get to know what they've been doing? And I mean, obviously nobody can know. We can't predict the future. But I wouldn't be surprised if, we have it already, which is what you were saying. And I also, like I said earlier, I think to fly the things with those G forces, it needs to have that time travel capability. It
has to.
I think also, as we're going down this yellow brick road, that there's disclosure happening.
Yeah.
Seemingly now. Why would they let us talk about this? Why is this being talked about? Why is this on 60 Minutes and in the New York Times and everywhere else? I think it's time, man. Yeah. I think it's go time. And I think it's happening now, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I agree. And I hope, I hope that people pick up your book. I had just started your second book. Now I'm moving it to the top of my pile, because now that I've heard you talk about it, it sounds incredible. But I think that the more people are aware of the history of what's happening, the less prone they're going to be to, getting bamboozled into something that is, just purely a setup for more consolidation of power. And something that you're really good at is making people really scared of something, or fucking psyoping everyone. So I really hope people read your books. I highly recommend the first one I read. The second one sounds awesome. And I wanted to tell you, I'm a big fan of Dr. Stephen Greer, and I know he's a controversial figure, but I think he's done a lot of incredible work in the disclosure movement, and also bringing people, these meditation techniques that he has brought to this community.
Yeah, CE5. Did he invent that, or was that around and he just popularized it?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. He was actually, he says that he was on a hill, and he was meditating, and that he thought that he fell asleep, but then found himself on a craft, and he was looking at this circle of beings, and he said that they were showing him his body on the mountain where he was meditating, and he was being shown all this imagery and being communicated to telepathically, and so they showed him and then they showed him, for a little further out where he was, and they showed him the kind of the state of Virginia, and they showed him the North American continent, and then they showed him that part of the Earth, and they took him up a little further, and they showed him the solar system, the Milky Way, where we were in the Milky Way, and then where the Milky Way was compared to Andromeda, and he's just he has this feeling, he was deep in meditation, and then they bring him back, and do it again, and so what he understood from what he felt they were showing him was how to show through consciousness where you are, so that you can make contact. That's what he understood,
and that's the origins of that sort of meditative.
Yeah. So Dr. Greer was a meditation teacher before he became an emergency room doctor and went to med school. He was.
I've heard other people swear by it too. Like and I think you almost have to have some underlying ability. I don't know, because I also think everybody has the ability. I've had precognition my whole life, and I feel like if you just pay attention to it, you would probably recognize that you do too. I think everybody does. Maybe we're all hardwired to be able to do that too.
I think so, in a lot of ways.
Better at it.
Well, I think some people maybe have more of some people are better if they could just pick up a ping pong paddle, and they're just going to be better than other people, have to practice more. I think you see.
I won a volleyball tournament in southern France only because I played tennis.
That's amazing. See, so one thing leads to the other.
I have a trophy, right?
That's awesome. But do you see how one skill allowed you to excel at another? So I just got back from a weekend under the stars with Dr. Greer, and
kidding.
And these meditation practices and these protocols they're incredible, and you they're really good for you either way, any way you cut the cookie. But when you do them out, in the desert and with people, you really can experience a level,
the collective consciousness thing. That's how mediums work, and like people that can summon spirits, is it's the group that brings them. Do you think that adds to it too?
I think that it helps when there's more people that is putting out this coherent signal. I think it amplifies the power of it.
Right. I guess that's what I was asking. Yeah. If you feel like a resonance that happens.
Oh, definitely. And, what's amazing is there's all these phenomena. Like sometimes it's like you would see on the video, a ship shows up, but more often than not, and I've only been to two different events that he's had, but sometimes this phenomenon is happening, and these arguably craft, they're right there on the ground, and they've been on the ground apparently the whole time, and they've just decided to kind of materialize, and
you can see them with your eyes,
and you literally and of course everyone's like, and I'm like, all right, everyone calm. Like, can you sit back down? I want to, I want to see too. We're trying to, we were meditating,
right?
But it's exciting.
It kind of breaks you out of that, meditative state. But then does it stay there? Like, I'm asking because I've never experienced this.
Yeah, and that's why I was excited to tell you about it, because I think you should absolutely try it one day. I just think it would be amazing for you.
Where does he do these?
So the ones that I went to were in Arizona, but typically
I'll be there next month, actually.
Oh, cool. I just think it would be amazing for you, and you have such a connection already. Because you're so plugged in. I just think that you should absolutely give it a try.
Not plugged in enough, man. I ain't seen shit.
Well,
I haven't had a single UFO sighting.
that could all change in one night, my friend.
That'd be cool.
I mean, honestly, I've been fascinated stuff. It all changed for me in one night, and I was like, watch, I'm gonna go, and it's gonna be the only night nothing happens. But sure enough, man, all this amazing phenomenon happened. And the other part of it is, when you and it just takes a little bit of practice. When you get good at these techniques, then you start to you get good at kind of emptying, and so you become nothing and everything all at once. And it's this amazing thing that happens, and then from there, like I was doing these protocols in New York City when I used to live in New York City for 20 years. I lived in New York City, and I didn't realize at the time how crazy it was for me to be trying to, kind of hail UFOs in the middle of New York City. And, it's kind of like trying to fish for a great white in a pond, I think. But because I do believe that we have all this radar technology, and that unfortunately there's a lot of aggression towards these craft, and I didn't realize the level of aggression until I started to learn more about, kind of the way that we go after them so aggressively, which should have been obvious from some of the research. And I'm sure some of the research you read, you see that, chase them, but the problem is when these companies like Skunk Works and they have technology that is, I mean, they arguably shot the ones down that came down in Roswell. They say they crashed, but why? What are their fucking UFOs malfunction? You know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, if they are machines, and if not to just keep interjecting future humans into this, but humans are fallible now.
Totally, yeah.
If we develop something in the future, I mean, I think about this every time I get on an airplane.
Yeah.
That's going to be the one time that it does go down.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I do think that something happened. I don't necessarily think. I don't know. Like, where do you? I've never heard that they were shot down.
No, not that they were shot, but they used an experimental new weapon that was effective in disrupting two ships.
1947.
That's what I'm saying, man. That's how far back it goes, and that was the first successful use of this weapon. It's a scalar weapon, and apparently they've used it to bring down many craft since. And so when we do these meditations, when the first thing that you acknowledge and just you say is, if it's safe, because you gotta realize that we've made it not very safe,
I see what you're saying. So that's the starting point, because our point in time is aggressive. We're still warring species. And, honestly, that's right. I think you will like the second book, because that's something I talk about a lot, is that probably one of the main reasons they disclosure, if it's happening, this could be a false horizon, as I talk about too, is that we might be moving away from a point where we are that warring species that just picks fights because of political and religious dogma and everything else. That I think that's what it's going to take. I almost wonder, I was talking about this with George Noria on Coast to Coast AM a few weeks ago, that like, what if religion was a litmus test that was put here to help them figure out at what point in their long past we are able to look past the things that suck us in, that blind us, that cause us to fight wars over politics and religion. And,
fascinating.
The safe space thing plays into that well. If we're still scared of this or anything else, if we treat everything as a threat, if we just machismoize it, not sure if that's a word, but it should be.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Then we're going to probably shoot at everything. At the point when we stop shooting is when they unmask themselves.
That's
and we all get to share in this conscious experience. So it's interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, how amazing would that be? And so the people who connect, right, and who are shown things like, and you've probably written about many of them as well, but they often say that that they are encouraging people to bypass whatever this kind of thing that has taken power, at least the majority of power, in terms of moving governments around and making sure things are put in place that let them retain this power, and making events happen, whatever it may be, that we bypass these systems by making contact ourselves. And oftentimes it comes with these amazing intuitions and downloads that happen. People are shown glimpses of not only the future, but the past. And some things come true and other things are like, oh my God, I could never have known that, but they showed me this. And it's an amazing set of phenomenon that happened. And, it's like, and I think that's because these things are all, it's like there's an interconnectedness to it. It's really profound.
And what you say, I talked to a guy named Jay in the UK. He has it's called Project Unity, and he said very similar things. He's done these CE5 protocols and is connected in this way, and said he could teach me. I don't know if that's true or not, but if if there's ways that you just go through this process, I can follow instructions pretty well. But yeah, very, very similar things to what you're saying in the context of like, God, I have so many fucking questions. It's not something that I've experienced, so it's hard for me to understand. But it also makes sense in the context of what I've been researching and writing. And particularly that aspect about our consciousness. But then it also makes me wonder, like, it once we get away from the nuts and bolts, because I do think the nuts and bolts are important for like the backward time travel stuff. But as far as like the psi component of it, if you can change people's perception, I guess I've always thought that they change people's perception in the context of screen memories. And I mean, UFO apathy, UFO amnesia, those seem to happen shortly after the event occurs. But like in real time, like you can project yourself into their realm, see your physical body on the ground below you, interact in these ways, or like make something visually appear that was there the whole time. There's so much more to unpack there that I just don't think we're even close to with with science and our way of studying something like that. And
I have an opinion about that, but I really think that science has come up, similar to the way DNA for the longest time only studied left the protein out of the equation. And now we know through a study of epigenetics that that's actually a pretty important part. The other half of the blueprint is
there's other things happening,
and so I see what's happening with physics, and then I wonder when we're going to realize that there's a metaphysical aspect involved that could not necessarily is going to be the end all be all, but it might just be the part of the equation that we're not looking at, consciousness. And I think that more and more as we understand more about quantum physics and the way that the consciousness affects the physical world, you see a lot of studies coming out that people are like, well, is that really real? Like how thought affects a number generator, and some really mind-blowing studies that have come out that people are like, wow, is that real? Like, and then people say, well, his work is, it's been debunked. I'm like, why? Because you read it on Google, it's been debunked. You know what I mean? Like, did you actually look at his work? The man was, like, I'm just going to use Dr. Emoto, who was freezing water crystals after speaking into them and showing so like this tattoo I'm getting is of a water crystal that has been spoken to with the words like, I love you. And it takes on this
similar things have been shown in plants too, right?
That's
like
right.
How they react differently to people's energy. And
and emotions.
Emotions, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a physical effect, that is measurable. And people are like, well, he wasn't a real doctor. I'm like, oh, dude, the guy had enough insight to see what would happen if he said the words, I love you, and then also, I hate you, to water and then flash freeze it. And then just look and see what happens. You could see
right. And also fuck that, because you don't have to have scientific credentials to do experiments.
That's
Anybody.
Right.
I teach my kids all the time. Well, let's do an experiment.
Oh, that's awesome.
Let's test that. You don't have to have credentials for your experiment to have legs. You just have to do it. And you have to follow some protocols, but
sure. Yeah, no, but then it's a breath of fresh air to hear you say, man. I don't know the times people have said, like, you're not a scientist. I'm like, do I have to be a scientist to research and read something? You know what I mean?
The scientific method is the simplest, most understandable thing in the entire world. If you follow the scientific method, I don't care if you're an astronaut or the top physicist at Harvard or Oxford or wherever.
Yeah.
It's the same system for everybody. You can be an 8-year-old kid and figure out the most important thing that everybody overlooked because you're asking questions nobody was asking.
That's right. That's right, man. And I'm excited for you. I'm gonna send you a CD that has like it has like the CE5 on it. I'll shoot you an email and I'll get you your address.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
you could just plug it in.
I'll just give you my address right now if that's cool.
That's totally cool. I'll just edit it out if you want. I mean,
no, I'm just kidding. That's a way better way of doing that. I mean, everybody's so easy to find these days.
It's true, man. You can't hide anything these days.
No.
But man, this has been incredible. I wanted to tell you, I had this awesome doctor on my show a few months ago who was telling me how him and this physicist Pat, they developed this laser which sends a photon back technically through time, but the application that they've used it on has been incredible. As far as stem cell growth and get people.
Interesting.
It's you got to check it out because it's.
Was it Ronald Mallett by chance? Because he's doing that research.
His name is Dr.
Lasers.
Dr. Todd Obakayetz. His name is. I'll send you a link to this, but it's fascinating how they came up with this thing and how they got this. So what they do is they target if let's say that I, destroyed this part of my arm, right? And rehab wasn't working and I wanted to try this new method. So they could they could get the laser to stop anywhere they wanted in the body. And that acts like a marker for wherever they send the laser, then they can have the stem cells, they'll stay wherever that laser goes, which is like a weird cat chasing a laser thing,
or like in all those war movies where they would put like the laser on the thing.
That's right.
The bullet would go there.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. And some really remarkable cases have coming out. And
so then they're targeting that cell location with the stem cells to help rebuild it. And then they just move the laser, almost like 3D printing kind of.
It's really mind blowing. It's as far as I understand it, it's really it's unique right now, and they're using this reserve of, I think they call them VL stem cells, and it stands for something silly like very little, because these were so small that they were only hypothesized to be in the body for many years, and then he found this old book that's like 600 pages that no one ever read. And then they started looking for them, and he found them, and these little, they don't seem to age, right? They're like, we use cord blood, and we're always looking for the youngest stem cells. Well, there seems to be this small reserve in the body, and what he does is he can multiply them by the millions with this laser. It's this crazy technology, and it sounds like what the kind of technology they're sitting on, but. He's opening up a clinic. He has one I think in California and also in Florida. But he's trying to, I'm hoping he gets them open and gets this out there sooner rather than later. But some really incredible case studies that he's doing, and people do it because it it kind of reverses the biological age of the body, but also
Right. The fountain of youth, so to speak.
Very cool technology. But the fact that they figured out a way to send a photon technically back in time in order to get to target like anywhere they want in the body. Because one dude had a spinal, this sheriff in Tijuana who was shot up by the cartel. They went down there just to, this guy couldn't feel anything from here down, and they thought, let's see what we can do, man. And they, within 6 months, 3 treatments, this guy, not only did he have feeling back, but he actually was very excited one day because he woke up with an erection, and he was like, that he got feeling back, and he was in pain for a long time. But last I saw, the dude was on an exercise
kickstand bike. Was probably painful too, right? Considering I hadn't had one in so long.
Dude, he was probably so excited, like so much pleasure.
Yeah, but also like, oh man, it's a little sore down there. I haven't used that for a long time. But no, can you imagine having sex again if you haven't been able to for so long? Like, that's my biggest fear of paralysis, to be honest. Like,
oh my God. Yeah. But they gave this dude his life back. I mean, last I saw, and what's cool is he let me have some of this footage from my podcast, so you can really kind of check it out. I'll send you
I'd love to. Yeah. That's really interesting. And it's going to take something like that, because senescence is real. There's no way to really stop it, but with time travel, it changes the scenario. And on a cellular level, especially, I hadn't really considered it in that capacity, but yeah,
that's why I thought you would find it very interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because you're talking about cellular anti-senescence with that's really
fascinating. Cool. And he tried to explain the science to me, but I was like,
well, I think lasers, at least right now, it's using light to manipulate time. Yes. And from these reports, it seems like light is instrumental. A lot of people ask me, why are there lights on the outside of these things? Why are there lights? They're trying to hide themselves. But there's these rotating lights. They spin very fast. And I think there's something about the rotation of not just lights, but the electromagnetic field that helps allow them to create closed time light curves and travel backward in time. And I think the lights are fundamental to that process. And lasers are probably the closest thing we have to that right now.
Yeah. Oh my God. I never even thought about that with the lights. That's such a great point, and
it wasn't my point. It's just through these conversations, people ask like, hey, what's up with the lights? That seems dumb. They're trying to hide from us.
Yeah. And all of a sudden they're like,
and they're usually red or blue. They're primary colors, which is interesting too. Although I haven't seen yellow.
No, I've never seen yellow. Blue sometime. I saw blue when I was with Dr. Greer that out under the stars. There was all these blue lights. It was so cool.
Yeah, I would love to know. I can't wait. I hope we've been talking about this in a very positive light, a very utopian sort of. We're on the edge of knowing. We're probably not, but it's. I feel like it's closer than we've ever been, and it's worth trying to give some hope, even if it's false hope. But I personally would love to see the craft, know how it works, even on a basic level. I'm not going to understand that shit, but see a future human. I've studied past humans my entire academic career. I've dug up all kinds of fossils, done forensic anthropology digs, murder scenarios and stuff. But to see a future human, not just its bones, but the fleshy.
There's a path, man. There's people who have definitely come face to face,
And you got their phone numbers, right?
That's right. And I actually do have some of their phone numbers. Some of the people watching this episode, no doubt, fall into this category. So I'm sure that we're going to hear about it in the comments, which will be very interesting to see and who pops up. But man, it's been real. I appreciate your time so much, Mike. I appreciate the conversation, you sharing all, so much wisdom with me, the books you're writing. I think these conversations are important to have right now. So I'm very grateful for your time.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'll pat you right back on the
Okay,
back
thanks.
there with the because the conversations are important to have. If I was doing this research and I had nobody to talk to about it,
Yeah.
what does that do? It takes people having these shows, doing the work to get their lighting just right for
Yeah.
these kinds of conversations. And yeah,
Very true,
mad
man.
respect to all of you and your efforts
Thank you.
involved in this, because it's not easy. Like, I'm sure, like we were talking about at the start of your show, you go into work and like,
Yeah.
how many people even know you have this podcast? And not just to
Not my
work, but
parents. No,
like people you
maybe they do.
talk to in any capacity. Is it well known?
Um, well, I mean, I've separated myself from the herd pretty much. So people, I mean, I've always been a little, marked to the beat of my own drum, but these days I fly my flag with pride. You know what I'm saying? I'm not hiding. Now, how many people do I know listen to it?
Oh, that's
Just,
not what I'm asking.
oh,
I don't care about that. I'm asking, like, if it's open conversation, or if it's still that
for
sort
me,
of, am I hiding this from people because I don't want them to judge me because it's kind of about paranormal stuff.
it started out for the first 6 months, 7 months, and now I've shed that like a snake shedding its skin.
Isn't that nice when you
It's
get
so
that moment
liberating.
where you kind of just shake that skin
Oh
off and you're
hell
like,
yeah, man!
fuck it. I
I'm
just
proud
want
of what I
to,
do. I love the
yeah, me
conversations I
too.
have. Hell
Me
yeah,
too. And I think that's important. And I think that needs to happen more. If we
yeah,
can all start going down these rabbit holes and connect our rabbit holes with little
yep,
gopher holes that connect them, because I don't know if rabbits dig that deep, then we can start to really connect this. And yeah, that's I'm not blowing smoke. I have mad respect for
appreciate
you and
that.
the others who do that, because I think it's so important.
Yeah, man. And it was just made me think of George Norrie and what an incredible show he has and the body of work
Yeah.
that he's put out.
Art Bell, George Knapp,
Yeah,
Jacques Vallée,
my
J. Allen
God.
Hynek, like all these, they're our ancestors. They're
Mhm.
ancestors in a way.
Absolutely, man. Um, well, I appreciate it, Mike. And I'll be in touch with you. I'll shoot you an email about that, and I'll let you know when this is all going to come out and stuff. And yeah, it'll be cool to see what pops up in the comments, man. But I'm going to send you some stuff about these kind of meditations. You're gonna, I
That'd be
think that
cool.
if you,
Yeah, I got a note here about Dr. Emoto too. I want
oh,
to
cool,
see
check his
about
work
your
out.
water crystal
Yeah,
tattoo. I'd love
yeah.
to know more about that too. That'd
Oh
be
man, he's gonna
awesome.
blow your mind. Yeah, really cool, really fascinating stuff. You're gonna love it. Cool, man. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you too. You have a good night.
You too. You take care.